Well, today, an ordinary American girl from an ordinary American family brought down a British prince with her truth and extraordinary courage. That is the first sentence of a statement released by the family of a woman who accused the man who the British until today called Prince Andrew of raping her when she was 17 years old. The British press and the press around the world is reporting tonight what the New York Times calls, quote, an extraordinary punishment that man named Andrew has now suffered at the hands of his brother, who is the current claimant of the title King of England. His older brother, a so-called king, had already taken his house away on the palace grounds and banished him to his still royal country house. And today, finally, the absurd title has been removed. The extraordinary punishment the New York Times is referring to is that Andrew will no longer be called a prince, and, quote, will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. And while we're on the subject, Windsor is a fake name too. Windsor is an invented name used to mask the German heritage of the people who have been claiming the position of royal family in Britain for the entire 20th and 21st century. In 1917, in the middle of the First World War, with England fighting against Germany, the so-called British royal family decided to mask their German background by plucking from out of nowhere the classically English-sounding name Windsor and suddenly claiming it as their own. The truth is a name change is not punishment. If you offered Jeffrey Epstein the option of being arrested and sent to prison as a child rapist or having to change his name, which do you think he would have chosen? And so now the big punishment for Andrew is that no one in Britain will call him the Duke of York or His Royal Highness, which no sane person anywhere ever should have called him? None of those preposterous descriptors of that human being have ever been allowed on this program. He had his titles removed from him on this program on the first mention of his disgraced name here. Nothing changed today. There was no new evidence for Andrew's older brother to suddenly react today, but the weight of Jeffrey Epstein's legacy forced the King of England to symbolically and only symbolically distance himself from his deeply Epstein-involved little brother. The manipulative so-called king wants it both ways. He wants to suggest that there's a possibility that his little brother did not rape Virginia Giuffre, as she claimed. And so the statement issued by the king's press release writers said, these censures are deemed necessary, notwithstanding the fact that he continues to deny the allegations against him. And then the king's writers tell this lie about the rest of the family, saying, their majesties wish to make clear that their thoughts and utmost sympathies have been and will remain with the victims and survivors of any and all forms of abuse. Okay, then give them the houses on your country estates. You just gave your accused rapist little brother another country house on your family's estates to live in for free for the rest of his life, and you claim that your utmost sympathies are not with your little brother, the accused rapist, but your utmost sympathies are with, quote, the victims and survivors of any and all forms of abuse. Do you mean any and all forms of abuse visited upon people around the world by the British Crown throughout its ugly history? Or do you just mean the survivors of any and all forms of abuse delivered directly to them by individual members of your family? The New York Times points out today that Charles and his little brother have done quite a job on that whole concept of British support of a monarchy during their public lifetimes. In 2023, a poll of British social attitudes by the National Center for Social Research found that 54% of people surveyed said that it was very or quite important for Britain to have a monarchy, compared with 86% in 1983. That 86% support of a monarchy was in the second year of Charles' first marriage to Diana, which ended miserably and helped drive support of the monarchy down every day, with Andrew then bursting into public view much later to drag it down into the mud from which we can hope it then sinks and disappears. The difference between the Charles who calls himself a king and the Donald who wants to be one is that Donald Trump does not care what comes after him. Charles wants the monarchy to live forever. Donald Trump knows that he cannot live forever. Donald Trump knows that his presidency cannot live forever. So Donald Trump knows that all he has to do is keep the Epstein files secret for the next 3.5 years. And the intensity of Donald Trump's apparent need to keep the Epstein files secret becomes more vivid every day, especially with every new day of the government shutdown. Congressman Robert Garcia is a leader of the Democrats who have joined with some Republicans in the House of Representatives who are trying to have the Epstein files released. And he now sees the government shutdown as being as much or more about the Epstein files as it is about the federal budget.
The president is very much shooting from the hip. The United States has tested nuclear weapons more than China and Russia combined. And we don't need the president shooting from the hip, injecting uncertainty into nuclear testing or anything to do with nuclear weapons. I mean, the prudent thing for him to do is, frankly, back off of what he said, recognize that he made a mistake if he was looking for leverage. This was not the way to do it.
It's criminal. It's outrageous that we have a duly elected member certified. The election has been certified by her own state. There's over 800,000 people in the state of Arizona with no representation in the Congress because Mike Johnson is afraid of the Epstein files and is currently right now playing cover up for Donald Trump and the White House. This idea that we now have a shutdown because they're too scared of the truth, they're too scared of getting justice for the survivors of women and girls that have been trafficked, as we know, in the past by Jeffrey Epstein and other powerful men. And so this shutdown has become, I think, really emblematic of the corruption in the Republican Party.
We now have a shutdown because you are too scared of the truth. The shutdown appeared to be about budget issues at the beginning, but as it drags on with absolutely no attempt to negotiate those budget issues, you have a right to wonder what it is really about. And with the Speaker of the House using the government shutdown as an excuse for not swearing in the newest elected member of the House of Representatives who would become the decisive vote in the House to release the Epstein files, gives Congressman Garcia more than enough evidence to reasonably argue that, quote, we now have a shutdown because you are too scared of the truth. If the shutdown is not about the Epstein files, then prove it. Speaker Johnson can swear in the newest elected member of the House of Representatives tomorrow, Adelita Grijalva. And the only reason he is not doing that is that she would then immediately become the decisive vote to release the Epstein files. Technically, she would become the 218th signature on a so-called discharge petition, which forces a vote in the House of Representatives on releasing the Epstein files, a vote everyone knows will pass. And so Donald Trump travels the world avoiding any possible negotiation to end the shutdown because the shutdown shuts down the Epstein files. Donald Trump proves the pointlessness of his world travels whenever he talks about them. Today on Air Force One, after his meetings in China, he told reporters something that would be unthinkable for any other president in that situation. He said, quote, Taiwan never came up. It was not discussed. Taiwan never came up. No kidding. It never comes up unless the American president brings it up. No Chinese dictator has ever jumped into a discussion on Taiwan unless forced to by an American president. And so Donald Trump is treating himself as just a spectator in the back of the room saying Taiwan never came up. Don't know why, it just never came up. Thereby proving the utter pointlessness of the Trump world tour, other than as a distraction from the Epstein files and a distraction from the cruelties that Donald Trump is inflicting around.
The latest developments surrounding the Epstein files exposes a deeper crisis of accountability and transparency within both American and British power structures. and Donald Trump stands directly at the center of it. What began as a scandal involving a disgraced British royal has expanded into a story about political manipulation, cover-ups, and the apparent use of government shutdowns to conceal truths that threaten the powerful. The renewed focus here is on Jeffrey Epstein's network, which has been reignited by Virginia Giuffre's posthumously released memoir and the symbolic stripping of Prince Andrew's titles. And it serves as a reminder that this scandal never ended, and that people can have consequences for it, and that there are many other people who should have consequences. The British monarchy now is trying to distance itself from Epstein's shadow, but the move kind of feels a little hollow. He's not suffering any major consequences, he's just getting his title stripped, whatever. Andrew's name change and the loss of titles, it acts as these cosmetic gestures that I think fail to deliver real justice, especially for the victims who should be listened to and supported in all this. Real accountability still lies buried in sealed documents that the Republicans continue to hold. The same Epstein files that have yet to reach the public. The same government withholding these documents, even though we know they have them, and we know that some names are on there that the public should see. So in the United States, this big controversy, it's been years at this point, has now taken on a distinctly political dimension to it. Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia and others accuse House Speaker Mike Johnson of deliberately prolonging the government shutdown to now prevent the release of the Epstein files. It's been going on this long, and the longer he continues it, the longer it takes for the Epstein files to come out. The refusal to seat newly elected Representative Adelita Grijalva, who would become the deciding vote to unseal those documents, has become symbolic of a broader effort to keep damaging information about the most powerful people in the world hidden from the public. The shutdown, once framed as a dispute over budget priorities, now appears to serve as a smokescreen shielding Trump and his allies from exposure. This moment underscores a recurring theme of the Trump presidency, the use of chaos and procedural manipulation to delay accountability, if we ever see that in our lifetimes. Trump's silence on Epstein, his denial, his distancing, combined with his frequent international distractions and policy stunts, and everything he drums up to distract us from the Epstein files, like suggesting new nuclear weapons testing most recently. That would not start a new Cold War for sure. All of this reflects a leader, an attempted leader, a failed leader, who is just eager to divert public attention from his many failures and many controversies, while he travels abroad and shifts the focus again towards, trade and, defense, here's some other theatrics. The domestic crisis of the lack of transparency in our government grows even deeper. Each day, the files remain sealed, suspicion continues to build that Trump and others in his circle have something to hide, and the silence, the secrecy just continues to increase, and it's not going to stop until we can get our government to open those files and show us what we really need to see. The parallel between Trump and the British monarchy appears really striking here, but there's also some main differences. So both institutions cling to symbols of power, the title, the importance, the names, while the public trust also continues to erode in those symbols, in those institutions. King Charles attempts to preserve the monarchy's image. Remember, he's a king, he's a monarch. So we still have a democracy, they still have a monarchy. He's attempting to preserve the image of this institution through symbolic punishment. We're going to remove the title from Andrew. How is that a punishment? Does he suffer any jail, anything? Hello? And Trump seeks to protect his political survival by concealing a lot of inconvenient truths that they probably triple, quadruple black markered over at this point. The difference is that Charles aims to keep his institution alive while he remains alive at this point, and he is offering some concessions, removing a title that is literally the lowest thing, but it is something. And whereas Trump does actually nothing and acts solely for his own benefit and couldn't seem to care less about the institutions of the government or the United States at all. The Epstein scandal has always been more about the global connections between the elite and the powerful protecting the other powerful than an individual man's crimes. It reveals the system that allowed them to thrive, the environment that allowed this to happen. especially in the United States with the recent shutdown and the government secrecy and the silence from those in power about what they know and about the evidence, reveals how little progress has been made in the past few months, the past year. What unfolds now reflects more than a political maneuver, a purposeful one. It represents a moral test of the public and of the government, if it still has any. If Congress continues blocking transparency, and if Trump manages to keep those Epstein files buried, the result will show the complete victory of corruption over justice. But I refuse to let that happen, and I will continue to speak out, and I will continue to say, release those Epstein files.